You know, it's been a hot minute since we looked at a tale from before Shakespeare's day. Let's fix that! Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a poem. Its author is unknown, but we do know that the poem was likely written around the late 14th century. The story itself is written in Middle English. If you've been around this channel for a long time, you'd know that I actually took a medieval literature class while I was in college. One of the assignments was that I had to read a work in one of the several early versions of the English language we learned. I actually did read a work that was written in Middle English, but it wasn't this one. It was a segment from the Canterbury Tales. However, I did read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in my class. Now, just to let you know, this is what Middle English looks like. You could probably pick out some phrases, but you've probably noticed that some words here haven't been used in centuries and have new definitions. There are translations of this work written into modern English, but I think it's best to have them side by side so you can look at the original meaning and how it's changed over the years. That's actually what I did with the translation I had, which was this one by Simon Armitage. As you can see here, the original Middle English and the modern text are side by side. Now, there actually is another translation out there by J.R.R. Tolkien, a name I would expect many of you to recognize. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm sure it's written well. Anyways, that's enough. Let's go to the story. The story begins at Christmas time in Camelot. Much celebration is to be had, but King Arthur craves the thrill of adventure and insists an epic tale be told. He wishes for entertainment, or he will not eat his dinner. Well, his wish is granted as a knight completely covered in green appears on a green horse. The Green Knight wishes to make a little wager with the knights, who are said to be the strongest in the world. The Green Knight wants one of them to behead him here and now, then in a year and a day, the Green Knight will return the blow to whoever beheaded him. Whoever does this wins his very amazing battleaxe. King Arthur is about to take on the challenge, since it seems no one else will, except Sir Gawain steps in to take the challenge. Now, Gawain is Arthur's nephew. Gawain believes himself to be the least important out of the knights, which is why he takes on the challenge. Gawain is allowed to take on the challenge, and he beheads the Green Knight with the axe in a single blow. However, the knight doesn't fall dead. The knight just walks over to his disembodied head and holds it as he gets back on his horse. Now, before the Green Knight leaves, he tells Gawain that he must seek him out on his own, without any need for persuasion, and he'll be waiting for him near the next year's end, at the Green Chapel. Then he leaves. Gawain keeps the axe as a trophy. Now time passes, and it is finally time for Gawain to seek out the Green Knight. He leaves on All Saints' Day. He travels through the bitter winter seeking the Green Chapel, but no such luck. He eventually comes to the castle of a lord and lady. The lord welcomes him in to partake in the Christmas time and New Year's celebrations. While there, Gawain befriends the lord and the lady. Now the poem also mentions someone else staying, an old woman who is always seen with the lady. Oh, well, we'll get to her in a moment. Gawain asks the lord if he knows where the Green Chapel is. Thankfully, the lord knows where it is, as it's not too far from here. Gawain is about to set off, but the lord insists he stay 3 more days, and when the time comes, he will send a servant to guide Gawain to the chapel. Gawain agrees to stay then. However, they come up with a little game first. You see, during those 3 days, the lord has to go out hunting. Gawain is to remain at the castle and relax. The lord says that he will give Gawain whatever he earns during the hunts, but in return, Gawain must give the lord what he earned during his time at the castle. So the first day comes, and the lord sets off. Gawain stays behind. All seems fine, but the lady of the house decides to see Gawain in his room. The lady tries to tempt Gawain, but he politely refuses her advances. However, she does manage to kiss Gawain, so when the lord returns, he gives Gawain his kill for that day, and Gawain gives him a kiss. Now, the lord asks where Gawain got the kiss, but Gawain says that that wasn't part of the deal. The deal was that they would give each other what they earned during that time. They don't have to explain where they got it from. Well, that seems fair enough. So the second day comes. The lady comes by again after the lord leaves, and again, Gawain turns her away, but not before the lady gives Gawain 2 kisses. So the lord comes back on the second day, gives Gawain his kill for that day, and Gawain gives the lord 2 kisses. Now, on the third day, things get a little different. The lady arrives again, and Gawain again turns her away. While she does give him 3 kisses, she also gives him her girdle, which is basically a belt. I think in this case it's more of a woven scarf that can be worn as a sash. Now, how the lady was able to convince Gawain to take it was she told him it would keep him safe as long as he didn't tell her husband that he had it. Gawain, naturally fearing for his life since he is soon to be beheaded, agrees to the deal. Well, the lord returns and gives Gawain his kills. In return, Gawain gives the lord 3 kisses, but not the girdle. The next morning, the lord's servant goes with Gawain to the Green Chapel. The servant guides Gawain most of the way there, but later leaves fearing the monster who lives at the Green Chapel. Before he leaves, he actually warns Gawain about it and promises not to tell anyone should Gawain decide to flee. However, Gawain is determined not to fear his upcoming demise and insists he continue down that path. Gawain meets the Green Knight at the chapel and readies himself. Now the knight swings his new axe down, but stops because Gawain flinched. Gawain readies himself properly at that time, and the knight swings again. Except this one was a check to make sure Gawain really was ready, and he was. Gawain didn't flinch that time. Alright, moment of truth. The knight swings again, and nicks Gawain on the neck. Gawain grabs his helmet and puts it on. He readies his sword and tells the knight that he had returned the blow and the game is over. Should the knight decide to strike again, Gawain will defend himself. Well, the Green Knight agrees with Gawain, and guess what? First of all, I'm gonna say this now, I might butcher this name. I've not used my Middle English accent in so long. Okay. The Green Knight is actually Lord battleaxe de Hot Desert, the lord that Gawain had been staying with. He says that the only reason Gawain was even hit by the blade of the axe was because he didn't tell the lord about the girdle his wife gave him. Now he knows that girdle, for his wife made it for him. The lady was actually in on the whole thing and was testing Gawain. Now the lord knows that Gawain took the girdle because Gawain feared for his own life, but he doesn't fully blame him for that. Gawain naturally feels like a failure and a coward for this and asks the lord how he can clear his name. The lord explains that by confessing his failure and by taking that blow to the neck, he is forgiven, and the lord gives him the girdle as a reminder of the experience. Gawain takes the girdle and wears it as a sash to remind him of his sin. The lord wishes for Gawain to spend another night at his home now that all this is over. He promises his wife won't bother him anymore. The lord also says that Morgan Le Fay was the old lady staying at his home and that her magic is the reason he was able to take on the Green Knight appearance. Gawain only wishes to go back to Camelot, so the two part ways. When Gawain makes it back to Camelot, he tells the king and all the knights about his adventure. Now that's where the story ends. Now let's analyze. There's a lot of descriptions of nature. Personally, the way the passing seasons are described are fascinating to me. I like to think that the description of the seasons represents new life turning to death. Gawain was about to face death in winter itself, the end of the year. However, it happened at the beginning of the new year. It was something to think about. The Green Knight himself is considered a symbol. He arrives completely covered in green with a sprig of holly and a large axe. Now, in my experience, the color green represents life itself. The Green Knight is also a representation of two traditional figures in medieval literature, the Green Man and the Wild Man. The Green Knight is a tester of the knights. He wants to see if they are truly worthy of the titles they carry, and as far as the story goes, Gawain is worthy of the title he carries. Now, one thing I found interesting as well is that we see both perspectives of the Lord's hunts and Gawain's interactions with the lady. Normally, most stories would just show Gawain's interactions with the lady since he's the main protagonist. However, I think the reason they show both perspectives is to show how much each experience is worth. There's also a description of how Gawain puts on his armor and what each piece protects. I like to think that this represents him not just preparing for physical battle, but spiritual battle as well, since he is tested later by the lady. There's much more symbolism and all kinds of themes to cover here, but since that would be a video all on its own, I'll stop here. Overall, I enjoyed the story. It's interesting and to me would still keep the reader engaged. However, to anyone who wants to read this, I would recommend picking up a translation that shows both the original Middle English and the translation side by side. That way you can get both meanings. I would recommend this for ages 18 and up. Even with a translation, it may be a little difficult to understand. Now, there have been many adaptations of this over the years. I saw a clip of Sword of the Valiant in my class. The quality was, well, 80s. Let's just say that. I haven't read any of the books nor seen any of the other film adaptations. However, I am glad to see that this story has been recognized and remembered for many centuries. I had a fun time reading this again. Also, I think it would help to read it out loud to get a better understanding of the poem's rhythm and the story itself. I hope you get a chance to enjoy this as much as I did. Happy reading!